Welcome to Oceanside Chat, Light Beyond Generations. Season 4 focuses on leading with emotional intelligence. Dr. Damon Herr, MD, is a California native with a passion for surgical excellence and compassionate patient care. He earned his bachelor's degree in psychology from San Jose State University before obtaining his medical degree from the Howard University College of Medicine. Afterwards, he completed a 5-year residency in general surgery at the Loma Linda University Medical Center. Since 2001, Dr. Herr has been a staff surgeon at Kaiser Permanente's Sacramento Medical Center, practicing in the field of general surgery with a focus on breast surgery. He serves as chair of the Multidisciplinary Breast Cancer Tumor Board and plays a key role in the breast cancer surgical practice. He also served as the assistant chief of the Department of Surgery and currently serves as volunteer clinical faculty for the UC Davis Surgical Residence, where he mentors and trains future surgeons. In addition to his clinical work, Dr. Herr leads initiatives such as the Enhanced Recovery After Surgery Program and Surgical Subspecialty Quality Committee. His involvement in these areas reflects his desire to provide members with care that is timely, safe, and of the highest quality. Keep listening to learn more about Dr. Herr's journey to medicine and how he leads himself and others with compassion and empathy.
Good morning, everyone. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Herr from Kaiser. Dr. Herr, I want to say hi to our... Yeah?
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
So welcome to my class.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Leading with Emotional Intelligence. And we have all the students online. And today is quite special because usually we conduct a class in person. But today, this is the only Zoom class we have this quarter.
Okay.
So this reminds us a lot about the COVID time. I haven't taught a Zoom class for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Zoom became a part of everybody's lives, whether we wanted it to or not.
Yeah. And to begin with, I want to read a letter that a patient wrote to Dr. Herr. So here you go. After I was diagnosed with cancer in February 2023, Dr. Herr was the first doctor we encountered at Kaiser. During our first appointment, his patience, compassion, confidence, and professionalism left a lasting impression on me. Dr. Herr took the time to explain the biopsy results, outlining viable options for the next steps, and providing the pros and cons of each. Conflicted with which option to choose, I sought his advice and eventually chose to follow his recommendation. When I re-encountered Dr. Herr in the surgery waiting room, his confidence reassured my family. Just before entering the surgery room, I saw Dr. Herr giving me a thumb up through the small window, and I responded with a smile. At a recent post-surgery follow-up appointment, Dr. Herr continued to share his knowledge and make recommendations. Throughout this challenging process, Dr. Herr never hesitated to share his expertise, creating a sense of safety and hope with his confidence and reassuring words. He effortlessly provided a broader perspective and practical advice beyond surgery. Dr. Herr saved my life and became an inspiration example for my daughter, who aspires to pursue a medical career. I cannot express enough gratitude to Dr. Herr for his profound impact on my life and my family. So thank you so much, Dr. Herr. Did you receive this letter? So the patient is actually me, and a little bit emotional, sorry, when I'm thinking about this. Yeah. And Dr. Herr was my surgeon. So it's really honored to have Dr. Herr actually in this interview. And because of my experience, I picked the topic with him as a, compassionate leadership. The reason I picked Dr. Herr for this topic, maybe I could go a little longer. I mean, there's a strong reason behind it because I was very healthy before I was diagnosed with cancer last year. And I don't really see a lot of doctors, other than the annual checkup that I have to do. But, the surgery and cancer was shocking for me. But I would have to say he was my first doctor that I saw. And probably as a surgeon, you would trust his technical expertise in the surgery room. But the last thing that I would expect is compassion. I was just thinking about how much that he was able to guide me through the entire process because he was the first doctor. And then the compassion that he demonstrated through our first meeting was literally served as a light, for me getting through the tough process. Well, so we want to get to know you a little more, Dr. Herr, please.
So yeah, tough to follow that introduction. First, just let me say thank you for trusting me to take care of you. So my name is Damon Nathaniel Herr. I'm originally from the Bay Area. I was born in San Jose. Grew up mostly in California, but have lived in other parts of the country. I did not grow up wanting to be a doctor. No idea what I wanted to be. My parents weren't college graduates, so I didn't have a lot of guideposts for higher education. Was a good student. Academics came easy. High school was easy, but I had very little guidance for college. Went to San Jose State University because it was where I lived, and initially didn't know what I wanted to do. Did some work in humanities, decided I was interested in psychology. And so I actually pursued a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology with a minor in humanities. And at some point, and I can't remember the exact moment, but I realized I wanted to become, and this will be funny, a psychiatrist. And so that meant applying to medical school. So I started to do all my prerequisites. I finished that. I took the MCAT, started the arduous process of applying to medical school, which is quite, complex. To be honest, it actually took me 2 years to get in. The first year I applied, I really didn't have a clear expectation, and I under applied, and I wasn't robust enough in terms of what I'd accomplished or done to make myself a good candidate. So I did some additional work. I became a certified suicide crisis counselor for Santa Clara County. I did some additional upper division undeclared graduate work in like neuroscience and things like that. And then the second year I applied to medical school, I got in. I ended up going back east for medical school, Howard University in Washington, D.C., which is a historically Black university. So that was a great kind of eye-opening, empathetic experience, being on the other end of that sort of world, not being the majority, not getting a little glimpse of what it's like to be the person who doesn't feel like they belong. But it was a wonderful experience, actually. And by the end, I felt very accepted, and I learned so much there. Was married. My wife was at Johns Hopkins at the time. She was a nurse. She finished her schooling in Maryland. And then I went to Loma Linda in Southern California to do surgical residency. Now, I told you I applied to medical school to be a psychiatrist, and then I ended up applying to surgical residency. So a little bit of a paradigm shift. What interested me about psychiatry was especially sort of like extreme psychology, like schizophrenia and psychoses. They're so fascinating that the mind could be so fractured or so delusional. What I discovered in medical school was that really wasn't going to make me satisfied in practice. It seemed like those patients you helped by making them stable but never curing them. And I realized that while I really enjoyed the psychological component of people and the emotional component, I felt a strong need to cure them. And that was something in me. And when I experienced surgery, I fell in love. It was the marriage of your technical skill, your hands, your judgment. But what I learned very early was that my psychology background was super important, because every encounter as a physician, regardless of what kind of physician you are, you're treating a person, you're not treating a disease. And understanding that person and being able to establish trust and rapport was so strong, and it was so integral to surgery. And as I went through surgical residency, it was just reinforced more and more with my experiences. I decided not to pursue any subspecialty training, mostly because I was married, I had 2 kids, and I promised my wife that at some point I'd stop training and get some money to pay off some bills and have a more regular life. And during my training, one of the programs, one of the hospitals as part of our program, was the Kaiser facility in Fontana, California. When I looked at all the different practice settings that I was exposed to, the academic settings, the private practice settings, the county settings, the VA, the doctors and the surgeons that seemed the most happy were the ones at Kaiser. It seemed like it offered a balance, a quality of life that I had promised my wife. And so as I was finishing, I looked for a job. I found this job at the Kaiser in Sacramento, which was close to home. We were both from the Bay Area. And so I took a position as a general surgeon. We came up here in 2001, and we've been here ever since. So it's my only job out of training. I've stayed there the whole time, in part because I love the people. I love the setting. I love not being driven by having to generate billings and sort of the pressure of the private practice. The Kaiser setting really lets the physician be a physician and really take care of the people rather than worrying about the process. And so I've stayed there. During my career, I developed a subspecialty in breast cancer, which is, of course, how we came to meet. And that comprises about a quarter to a third of my practice is breast surgery. And then the rest is the wide field of general surgery. So I've been here in Sacramento since 2001. Been married for a lot longer than that, two grown adult children. And I've been very happy in my practice. So I have some other administrative things and things I've done with quality within my system, and I've served as the assistant chief of my department. But the thing that's been most rewarding is the actual delivery of care. So I've kind of tried to focus my career on the majority of my time being spent taking care of people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I feel like that's kind of just a life story because we just found out this morning that we both actually came from the Bay Area in a very close proximity in terms of our neighborhood. But then all the way to Sacramento. I'm new here, 2019, moved in Sacramento. And then, I met you at the Kaiser Sacramento facility.
Yep.
So thanks for sharing your story because all of us has unique stories and stories define us. With your journey, I guess pursuing to be a surgeon, and you're very happy, and that's sort of the sentiment I take. Even the first time I met with you, every time I met with you, you're so proud of what you're doing. You're very happy with what you're doing. You have a great relationship with your patients. I'm curious about if you were to pick like a few pivotal moments that defined who you are, and is there a one example, two example that you feel like that deeply shaped you, especially when it comes to compassion?
I mean, it's hard to pick a specific event. I would say that, in prior to being a physician, I would say my relationship with my wife, learning, we met very young, we were married very young. We've actually been married for well over 30 years. Learning at a young age that your relationship with people and how important that is in everyday life. Learning that you don't always get to have things your way. Learning that everything is a compromise. Learning that it's important to be aware of how other people feel and not just what they feel, but what do they need? What do they want? What are they afraid of? What makes them happy? What makes them who they are, right? And recognizing that and helping to foster that, and likewise getting that same reciprocity from somebody that you care about. And so, my wife and us being married very young and then going to school and waiting to have children, getting to really know each other very well and really kind of grow up together. I think it really taught me the importance of people in your life, and how very, how much work it takes, and how easy you can damage relationships, right? And much like, to use a silly, example like the garden, you don't just throw out seeds and water it and then it just happens. You have to trim and tend and fertilize and treat the pests. And, life is like that too, and how you interact with people. I had moments in my life, the birth of my children was incredibly moving. I was present for both of them. And, it's really hard to explain how that changes you. You become a very different person.
Moment, yeah.
You become a very, different person. I've had loss. I've lost both my parents. I'll tell you, oh, I'm going to cry again.
I resonate that a lot because the last my father,
Yeah.
2019.
So my father was actually my stepfather. I never knew my biological father. So he was the only father I had. And he was a good man, but a flawed man. And he tried and he did his best. And I never felt unloved and we were never treated poorly or abused. But he didn't take care of himself and he had some habits that were self-destructive. And my parents divorced when I was a freshman in high school. And I kind of blamed him because it was his fault. And I kind of didn't like him for a long time. And he knew he was proud of me. He always wanted me to go to Stanford. For why, I don't know, because we have no relationship with Stanford, but I did work at the Children's Hospital briefly. But he knew I was trying to get into medical school, but he died unexpectedly before I got in. And I didn't cry, I didn't grieve him. And then it was about a year after his passing, and I got my first acceptance letter to medical school. It was actually the one from Howard, where I ended up going. And I just broke down. And it wasn't because I got in.
Because of your father.
It was because of him. So that kind of just showed me how important people are in your lives and how you have to tend and respect those relationships. And the old adage, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. I mean, it's true. Sometimes we take things for granted. Sometimes we take things for course, but everything really has to be appreciated. You have to be mindful of your world, what's around you.
Compassion is a topic very personal to me. There's for a few reasons. One is because I think I used to tell my friends, my coworker, that I feel like I'm always working very hard, and I be promoted when I was pretty young, start leading people. But I think my leadership style is definitely not a compassionate sort of leadership style to begin with. So I used to, I had a reputation out there that people say, if you want to learn something, work for Helen. If you want to have fun or life, maybe not your best choice. And, so I don't know how I think about this. When I heard about this when I was still pretty young, and I thought, well, life is pretty hard, and we all have to work hard to earn it, right? So, but when I get older and more things happen, and I'm just, when I see sometimes my family or my team or my friends are going through some difficult situation, and I feel like I'm lack of that capability to, like, I'm a kind and nice person. I have a good heart, but how can I connect with them in a way, compassionate, so they can feel that I care and love for them, right? So I think one time I told my friends, I just feel like I somehow wired it differently. I wanted to, but I don't know how. So, I'm curious about this topic about a compassion, because I hold myself to a very high standard, and I work very hard. When something happens, I would do almost like, if I'm determined if it's important, especially if it's important for my people, my team, my family, I would take whatever cost to get there, right? So I have literally no self-compassion for myself. It's just like, I'm here on a mission that I just need to do this. If it means that I sacrifice myself in some extent, I will have to do it. And what's interesting about it was when I got sick, and my friends got me connected with some meditation teacher. So I got this like a few meeting with her, and she was very kind. She was just doing this as a favor. But when the first thing, she got to know me, and then she said, Helen, I think we need to work on self-compassion. I'm like, what do you mean? Because self-compassion is I think that's the first time I even heard about the terminology, which is very recent, last year, And so I started looking into this, with your psychology background and everything. I'm curious about, is that because I lack of self-compassion for myself? Therefore, I feel it is difficult to demonstrate my compassion to others. Is that it's not a one-way street? For example, I can be very compassionate with my daughter, but I don't feel compassion for myself. And is that supposed to be like two-way street? Because I have to feel that for myself first before I'm able to apply that to others, or vice versa.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
So I would say that, first of all, we're all different, right? So everybody's wired different. Our personalities are different. We all come from different cultures, different upbringings. We have different role models set by our parents. And some people grow up in homes where feelings are open and expressed, and love and approval are shown easily. And some people grow up in environments where those emotions are more subtle, or sometimes not even considered appropriate, and more of a driven household, or with parental expectations that we perform or we achieve certain goals. And so the work hard ethic is a common theme. And as we get into adulthood, a lot of our behaviors are ingrained from childhood, and from what we see as a role model, and what are reinforced, what we get positive reinforcement for. The concept of self-compassion, it isn't exceptionally new, but it is being more in the forefront of of psychology and self-help literature over the last decade or so. And I mean, the idea of self-compassion, I think, is simple, and it's that you have to afford to yourself the same grace that you would afford to anybody else in your life, right? So like if you can look at your daughter, for example, and something bad happens, or a mistake is made, or whatever it is, and you can look and you can say, hey, it's okay, right? Everything will be fine. I love you. You're not a bad person. This happens. You're going to get past it. This is an opportunity to learn and to grow. And a lot of us feel like, oh, we can do that for other people very easily, but sometimes we have difficulty doing that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think, much like empathy, some of us are better at it. And whether it's our hardwired DNA, or whether it's just the neural pathways that formed as we were children, whatever the reason, we're all a little different. And some of us, it comes very easily, and for some of us, it's very difficult, right? The extreme, like psychopathies and sociopaths, they seem to not be able to do it. They're not wired for it. But the average person can do it. And the thing is, these things are all teachable. Everybody can learn to have some degree of self-compassion. Empathy, it comes natural to many people, to others and not. It can be taught, right? And this has been shown, in the psychology literature and the education literature, and now even in the medical literature, right? It is definitely something that can be taught. But what it requires the person seeking it to make an effort, and to really, acknowledge that this is something I want to be able to do this, and then seek out the tools to try to be better at it, right? And then learn to give yourself a break if you're not so great at it, or if it doesn't come easily. And in medical training, when I went to medical school, medical school, the first couple of years is just college. It's didactic. You're in lecture, you're regurgitating information. You're not coming up with new ideas. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're just learning, biochemistry and anatomy. And this is rote regurgitative learning. And then you suddenly transition in the traditional model, you transition into the clinical years, third year, fourth year. And now all of a sudden you're interacting with living people. Mm-hmm. And when I went to medical school in the early 90s, they didn't teach you that. There wasn't a didactic class in how to listen, right? Mm-hmm. Active listening wasn't a thing, right? Active listening is a big deal now, but it wasn't a thing back in the early 90s. And so some of us were really good at talking to people, and others not so. And you could see it when you would watch your classmates interview somebody or talk to a patient, and you can watch them and think to yourself like, oh my goodness, why are you asking that? Or, they just gave you this verbal, this body cue, and you missed it, right? Mm-hmm. But learning how to read people, learning how to be attentive, learning how to truly listen, right? Not just hear them, but listen to them, and make them understand that you're listening to them. Show them that you're responding to their cues, that you're picking up. And this is what active listening is, right? It's a purposeful intent where you prepare to listen. You pick up on verbal and nonverbal cues. You let the person recognize that you're picking up on it, that, hey, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing you say this, right? It's showing that, the person you're listening to right now is more important than you, right? So there's some degree of humility in this, right? There's no hubris in active listening. You have to be humble. These can all be taught. And, you know, we did do some practice patients when I was in medical school. Medical schools were starting to do that. But now role playing and more standardized patient models in medical school are being done universally to try to teach this. So there's a lot of good data that shows that the more stressed a person is, the harder they're working, there's a drop in empathy, right? When you become tired and worn down and exhausted, you start to lose empathy for those around you, and you start to lose self-compassion. There was a good study actually by, if I remember correctly, it was Duke University. I believe it came out in 2021 in the Annals of Surgery, of all places, talking about empathy. And it was a massive literature search and a review of programs in medical schools. And what it showed was that there's really good data that shows that in the stressful environment of medical school, and I would apply this to all upper division learning, that there is a decrease in empathy. That the more stressed you are, the harder it is for you to feel compassion for other people. And what it also showed was that there really was no standardized curriculum in medical education for teaching this. And then they made some proposals about how you could create standardized didactic type courses to start. But it really did show that the places where there was success were programs that were using role playing, which, you know, often people hate to do, right? It feels very uncomfortable to pretend to be somebody, or standardized patients, right? And that in these programs, the students tended to have higher empathy scores. So it absolutely can be taught, right? But it has to be taught in the right environment. And we have to, you know, acknowledge that we're all going to grasp it or learn at a different rate. And we're all going to be, you know, better at it. Some are going to be great at it. For some people, it comes very easily. But I think it's a very key part of, in my profession, I think it's the key to taking care of a person. You know, one of the things that in preparing for today, you had sent me some prompts, some ideas, some things to think about that we might discuss. And one of the questions you had posited was, what's the difference between a good physician and a great physician? What makes an exceptional physician exceptional, right? And I actually don't think that's a hard question. I actually think it's really easy, right? We kind of assume at a baseline that anybody in the medical profession has a certain degree of academic ability. So we're smart, right? Some of us are really smart, and some of us are just somewhat smart, but we're all smart. We mastered all this information to get this certification. And we all can treat disease. But the really good doctor doesn't treat the disease. They treat the patient. They listen to their patients. They're attentive to their patients. They identify what does my patient want? What is my patient afraid of? What is the goal that my patient wants to achieve? Regardless of what their diagnosis is, what does my patient want the end of this road to be, right? And like, so listening, understanding, and then addressing those things. When you see what your patients are worried about or afraid of, address it. You know, put it out in the open, talk about it. Let them realize that, hey, they get you. They're really listening to me, right? When I encounter a patient, for example, like I can't remember all the specifics of the first day we met. You know, your introduction was very eloquent, but I mean, I try to do that with every patient, you know, and sometimes I'm more successful, sometimes less, but there's a few simple things like, one, be prepared, right? So know the patient, read up, understand everything when you come into the room, right? Make sure that you address people the way they want to be addressed. If you're not sure how a name's pronounced, ask, right? It's a sign of respect to care how to pronounce somebody's name. You know, to continually mispronounce someone's name is a sign of disrespect. So these are simple things. When you sit with a patient, sit at eye level or slightly below, right? Don't overbear the patient. Be humble, right? Be below the patient or at the patient's level. And mostly just listen. You know, mostly just listen. And I think if you can make a patient feel heard and respected, then you will be trusted. And if your patient trusts you, then the entire therapeutic endeavor, whether it goes perfect, whether there are complications or hiccups, it all goes better. Because the patient, whether it's true or not, believes that they can trust you and that you care.
Mhm.
And establishing that rapport is like, it's very, very important. I think the doctors, whether they're specialists or family practice doctors, it doesn't matter what your specialty is. I think if you're good at that, then I think your patients will trust you. They will stay with you. They will speak well of you. And it means they will do what you ask them to do. Right? When you work as a team and you come up with a treatment plan, if I'm asking you to do something, and what I'm asking you to do may be very scary, like have an operation, right? Or follow a certain regimen, take a certain medication, whatever it is I'm asking you to do, you have to trust that I'm choosing this, I'm recommending this in your best interest, that I wouldn't do something to harm you, that I just care about what's best for you. And, you know, a family practice doctor has a lifetime with a patient to establish rapport. I have about 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to establish rapport pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
when that patient leaves my office, if we're going to be doing an operation, which is an incredibly intimate thing
Mhm.
for a doctor to do to a patient, they've got to buy in. They've got to believe that, yeah, this person is going to be able to take care of me. I can trust this person.
Mhm.
So it's really super important. And moments of compassion.
Mhm.
Every time a patient tells me thank you.
Mhm.
Every time a patient says, you helped me through something horrible, you got me through this, you listened to me, you cared about me, I felt cared for. That's like the whole reason I come back the next day to the office. I don't do this for the money or for
Mhm.
being a surgeon. I do it because it gives me a chance to help people in a meaningful way. And the reward is a thank you. When I've truly helped somebody, that's its own reward.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, you definitely did it for me and for our family. And when you answered a lot of questions that was actually I'm curious to ask. That's wonderful. And when you describing about how you prepare for the meeting with the patient, that's exactly how I was experienced back then. I think active listening probably get you more connected with that person and their story and their fear, their worries, and as well as, I mean, you present yourself very humble, and you were in my word. I think you were listening to me, and so that totally all connect the dots now. So you got your secret out there, so we can all prepare ourselves for a conversation like that.
The non-secret secret, yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, it's not, it's not a secret. It's just not everybody does it. I mean, William Osler, who is, kind of credited as one of the fathers of American medicine, invented the residency system, was one of the founders of Johns Hopkins University. There's a famous quote that's attributed to him. And that quote is a good physician treats the disease. A great physician treats the person or the patient who has the disease. And that boils down to, I'm taking care of you as a person and all that implies. So it's not secret, right? It's not a secret. But it's just something that you sometimes have to remind yourself and be mindful of. And again, it comes more easily for some physicians and less so for others. Bedside manner is another, common phrase for this ability or this care, or what we call soft skills, right? How you just how you interact with people, how you talk to people. And in my capacity, I do train surgical residents for UC Davis's surgical program. I'm an assistant, volunteer faculty there. Also, we take medical students from UC Davis and from the North State, which is the newer medical school in the area. And so we get them during their third year surgical rotations. And the reason they're there is to learn the medicine, right? But you have to teach them the compassion part too. And so at least I try when I'm working with them is to, remind them why they're actually there. And when I'm teaching them to interview patients, to take a history, the same things we just talked about. I try to reinforce that with them. You need to pay attention, you need to listen. I go, but ask yourself, what does the patient want out of this? What is the patient afraid of? What does the patient need, right? And you don't know the answer going in. You may think you do. Oh, they want to be cured. Oh, they want this. Well, maybe what the person wants is to make it to their granddaughter's graduation. They can care less about the cancer. They just want to be alive in 3 months so they can travel to wherever they have to get to, right? what is tangible for that patient? So, reinforcing these things. And I am seeing now that the medical students do seem to be getting more of this in sort of a curriculum directed way. And it's clear that they're not just hearing it from us. It may be strange to be hearing it from your surgical mentor and not from the family practice mentor, but I think it's equally important. So I try to stress that with the residents. And then that compassion too, it goes beyond the patient doctor relationship, right? I mean, in the professional world, we have to have compassion for our colleagues. We have to have compassion for our leaders and for those whom we lead, right? And I think compassion being the topic, compassion kind of is the underpinning of all of this, right? If I'm going to truly lead somebody, if I'm going to advise somebody, train somebody, I have to be aware of them. What are they going through? What do they need? What are they looking to get out of this relationship? When decisions get made, how do those decisions affect people? I've always found that, when we're doing something at the department level or higher, I've been involved in rolling out some, quality processes in the hospital over the last 10 years. I was involved in the National Surgical Quality Index rollout, our enhanced recovery program. And so I've served as a chief of resource management. And so when you're in these leadership positions, you have an agenda. You're asked or tasked to accomplish something, right? And the only way you can truly affect a change or roll out a program is you have to get the people that you're asking to change their behavior to believe in it, to buy into it, right? And the only way you can do that is if you truly understand what their concerns are, what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, how what you're asking them to do affects their day-to-day life. And that's compassion. That's caring enough to ask those questions. It's caring enough to look and be aware of, hey, I'm asking you to do this. I see the impact it's having on you, right? And letting them know, I get it, right? So how can we alter it? How can we change it? How can we accommodate you? How can we do it so that this works for you? Not just for the organization or the department, but for each individual. How can we make this work for you? And there are some things that are absolutes and you have to do, but there's usually wiggle room and compromise in most everything. But you have to be willing to do that. And that's a form of compassion, right? I don't know everything. My way isn't the only way. You have good ideas too. I need to listen to that. I need to recognize your effort. I need to reward your effort, not just your success, but your effort, right? And the buy-in is important. There are lots of studies in industry that looks at employee retention and why do people stay at their job? People stay at their job because they feel valued, because they trust their colleagues, because they believe in their leaders. They don't stay for a paycheck. They don't stay, if an employee sees their workplace as a transactional environment, they're way more likely to leave. And everybody in business, no matter what your avenue of business or industry, knows that a committed, stable, happy workforce is a key to success. And you keep people happy by listening to them. It doesn't mean you give them everything that they want, but you listen to them and you try to give them what's important to them. And that's a form of compassion.
Yeah.
That's caring, right? It has its own motivation to keep everything good for you too. But if you don't care enough to do that, if you don't have that compassion, you won't do it. And it's the same in all relationships, I think.
Yeah. That's so interesting. There's such a rich information you just shared, both on the compassion front as well as the formality, kind of in a leadership way. How do you view compassion? I mean, the good news that I have for you is, I think there's a couple awakening moments for me, as when it comes to compassion. And number one, it was the COVID years that we went through. I mean, I think that was an awakening moment that everybody is going through a very difficult time. And I think it's hard not to be empathetic for some of the situation that we all gone through. I think when I'm myself going through some of this, I mean, it's easier for me to relate to other people. Therefore, we might have difficulties, challenges to complete some tasks, but, we find a way to get there collectively together. the second piece, of course, is my own, cancer journey. And I think that gave me so much more time to reflect, and suffering was to that level. And I think I have to, that was the first time I told myself that I think you could take a break. It's okay. You're going through some pretty difficult time, going to be okay with that. But I think after this experience that I now look at things in a very different way. And we have, other people going through cancer journey within this community. And I think I learned so much from my own experience, like what to do when I encounter them, and what can I offer? What help can I do, to help them to be just life a little bit easier, just having that conversation, So
And
that's a good news.
That's compassion.
Right. That's a good news. But I hope that not everyone has to go through traumatic experience like me, before they, they open themselves for that. That's why I think it's worthwhile to talk about compassion, in a class like this, because we are talking about all the students within this class, a very seasoned, experienced profession. I think many of them, if not all, are in somewhat a leadership capacity. What you just described is the transferable skill. And I also thinking that doctors, because we all see doctor, every one of us has, our doctors community that we go see, right? Whether it's just a family practice or something more specialized. So it's easy to relate yourself to a doctor's experience. And the skills that or practice that you just described is transferable to almost any leadership position, even just leading yourself or leading, your team and being a leader, and also being compassionate to your own supervisor or manager, because it's a 360-degree kind of a compassion journey.
Yeah, and driven professionals, no matter what you do in life, if you're a driven person, you had touched on this earlier in the talk about, sort of not being easy on yourself, right? Driving yourself, pushing yourself, having a certain expectations, not giving yourself a break. And, in my profession, that is sort of the traditional teaching, was that medicine wasn't a job. Medicine was your life. A doctor wasn't what you did. A doctor was what you were, right? And so that there was this sort of overriding ideal that you put your profession before everything else. You put your professional life ahead of your family life, ahead of outside personal pursuits, at the expense of other relationships, right? And to a degree, you have to be available and accessible to your patients and whatnot. And you do, when you're there, you have to give everything. You do have to be present. You do have to give it all. But more and more in medicine is the recognition that we can't take care of people if we don't take care of ourselves. And the pandemic was I think an absolutely sort of bellwether moment for making people realize that, regardless of whether you were a frontline physician or nurse, in the ER wearing the moon suits, or like as a surgeon having to deal with, what do we do with patients who have it? What do we, how do we treat people? What can we still do elective surgery? What about our cancer patients? Hospitals were shut down, ORs were shut down, except for like life-threatening emergencies, and having to deal with all that. Then having to have compassion for the fear of your coworkers. Like, oh my God, am I going to get COVID? Am I going to die taking care of people? Because you do sort of put yourself at risk. In surgery, I'm potentially exposed to body fluids all the time, and there's always the risk of contracting HIV or hepatitis or something like that unexpectedly, or communicable diseases just just people coming in just getting the flu. You're seeing people all day long who oftentimes are actively ill, right? And so like the emergency room is the extreme example. And so self-compassion, this idea that, hey, look, we do something that's really stressful. We do something that is, while it's rewarding personally, on financially, doctors get paid well, most of them, but it comes at an expense. It comes at a personal expense, and finding a balance kind of in your life. And
also in extension, not only you go home, your family.
Exactly.
And I
Right.
think family is the sort of the you know, the
Right.
soft spot for everyone.
That is exactly right, because you have to be present for your family,
Yeah.
right? You can't. So there's some degree of like learning how to compartmentalize, but what's more important is learning to be grateful and mindful, right? So mindfulness is this concept that's, you know, been really hot for like the last 5 or 6 years. And in my own organization, they routinely do, you know, these 2-day retreat type things for the physicians to teach mindfulness and gratefulness and all this sort of stuff. And the whole idea is to try to, you know, improve what we call joy and meaning in medicine, or JAM, right? Like, you're a doctor. Why are you a doctor? You know, there's so much stress. There's regulation, there's paperwork, there's oversight, there's auditing, there's, you know, patient demands, there's institutional demands, there's governmental demands, there's time demands, there's ORs that don't start on time, there's equipment that breaks. There's so many stressors, right?
And you're dealing with life and death.
You're dealing with,
stake
yeah,
is so
it's
high.
it's a little stressful. It is, when you're operating on someone and you're trying to keep them from dying. There's a little bit of stress involved. But recognizing that we could do our job a whole lot better if we're balanced, if we're having self-compassion, right? If we're taking care of ourselves as people and as spouses and children and parents, right? And friends, and not just as doctors or, you know, insert whatever your profession is, right? Lawyer, business leader, doesn't matter. You have to take care of yourself, right? You have to recognize when you need a moment. You need to do the things that bring you joy and happiness, and to recharge, right? And so this is kind of a good segue. So for me, mid-career, feeling a little burned out, feeling a little overwhelmed by just constant changes, constant demands, more documentation, more time on the computer, less time with the patient, seemingly unhappy patients, complain. You know, everybody wants everything. Everybody's entitled. All of these sort of stresses. And I was like, oh, geez, this is starting to become like, I know I love this, but how much do I love it now, right? And so I found a way to recharge. And for me, I started doing mission trips. I hooked up with a group that has a hospital that they built in Guatemala. I didn't go during the pandemic, but I've gone 5 times in the last 8 years. I've taken my wife, I've taken both of my children who both had some medical training, you know, going down to a mission hospital in the jungle of Guatemala and spending a week operating, and, you know, free from all the sort of overburden of regulation in the United States and the demands, just taking care of people who were just appreciative that you came down and helped them. And it was just a very fulfilling sort of battery recharging kind of moment. And then I would come back and I'd be like, okay, yeah, no, I remember why I do this. I remember why I love doing this. And then that makes it a little easier to sort of, you know, take the days that don't go so well, or the patient interactions that aren't perfect, or, you know, when there's a complication or a bad outcome on pathology or something. And it's just finding a way to revitalize yourself, to keep the joy that you have for what you do present. And so in my organization, in the Kaiser system, especially the Permanente Medical Group, which is the physician group that takes care of all of the Northern California patients, it's a really big program. To this idea that you know, self-help, self-compassion, teaching you to be mindful, to appreciate, to be grateful, and to focus on the things that make medicine joyous, right? Now, this isn't to like be able to ignore the stuff that makes it tedious, but just to sort of counterbalance it,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
To make it worth still doing. So, I mean, I think self-compassion, you know, being okay if you weren't perfect, right? But learn from it, you know, but accept that you're not perfect. You know, if you miss something, you make a mistake, sure, figure out how to not do that again, right? Own it, but give yourself the grace to be okay with it, right? And that you're still worthy, you still can do your job, you're still helping people, right? And not to kill yourself over everything that doesn't go perfect. And it's hard because many doctors are perfectionists. We're all definitely type A to some degree, right? And that's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard when something doesn't go the way you want it. You blame yourself first.
Yeah.
You may have done everything right. It might have been something you had no control over,
Mhm.
but you still find a way to blame yourself. Well, you have to stop doing that,
Mhm.
right? You have to forgive yourself. You have to have compassion for yourself. So I think that's real important. And like you said, it translates to home. It translates to your relationships with your significant others, with your children, right?
Exactly.
The dynamics are a little different, but the underlying themes are the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're living in a pivotal period of time in many ways. But one thing, obviously, you know, is sort of the increasing power of AI.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious when it comes to AI in the context of compassion. Do you think AI is going to help enhance the compassion that we really needed, both for ourselves and for others, or is going to somewhat change, you know, the dynamic that we're facing now? I mean, would it be the worst case scenario? Would even be hurting us in some way? What's your point of view of that?
So AI in medicine, my view is it's inevitable. AI already is and is going to be an increasingly important and significant tool in the delivery of medicine and healthcare. What we let it do or what we develop it to do is going to vary greatly, and it's going to depend on a lot of things. I think from a standpoint of data processing and research, crunching data, discovering new medications, being able to run simulations of drugs and protein folding and all this kind of stuff. I think as a computational tool, it has the capacity to be revolutionary. It's going to allow us to make new discoveries and changes on a very rapid pace. On the actual delivery side, what I see AI becoming, and it's already being used in this way, one is a direct tool for the physician, as a scribe, as a diagnostic tool, as a way to help review a workup to come up with a differential diagnosis to make sure that you're not missing something, right? Have I considered all the potentials? Is there something I'm not seeing here that maybe this AI program will pick up on that I didn't, or double checking your work, your decision making, and things like that. So it has a capacity to be sort of a self-help tool and a guide and delivery, but it also has the potential to be a physician extender, right? So, much like nurse practitioners and physician's assistants developed as professions to help kind of expand what the physician can do and the touch points the physician has, AI can do the same thing. And there are a lot of companies that are developing AI-driven, medical avatars, ways to deliver certain kinds of care, either because it's more efficient or because it fills gaps where there aren't people to do it, right? And that's probably the most important way that AI can be used, to be available when there isn't a human counterpart to do it. But there's been varying success, right? AI has problems. The old saying about computers in general, garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's only as good as we create it. And the thing about AI and all the different structures that are, the large language models and what the generative technology, the chat GPTs have done, and then some of the newer concepts like global workspace theory. What they're really looking at is theories of intelligence, right? They're looking at, how do we work? Early AI is neural net thinking, like trying to mimic how the brain works, right? And a lot of the problems we run in is we don't really know how intelligence works biologically. We don't know how human intelligence works. We don't really understand the brain, right? But we're trying to create something artificial that mimics something that we don't even understand. So that creates some problems. A lot of AI developers will tell you they don't really know how their AI works. They built it, they programmed it, but some of the decisions that get made and how it produces some of what it produces, they can't show you step by step how it actually happens. So there is still some magic in it, right? I'm blanking on the guy's name now, but he's down in La Jolla. he was the guy that theorized the GWT, or the global workspace theory. And the question is, will there ever be a truly a self-questioning intelligence, like a true intelligence that feels empathy, that feels compassion, that is artificial, right? And the thing is, there's nothing to suggest that we'll be able to develop that. But what we have now can mimic it really well, right? It can really fake it. And when you look at AI generated avatars that deliver sort of like chronic condition healthcare stuff, people interact with it. And when you test them and you poll them about how they felt about interacting with it, they feel like they were shown compassion. So, I mean, I think we have the ability to show compassion, whether you want to call it true compassion or mimicking compassion through AI. I think it's definitely possible. In fact, there are a couple studies that point out that maybe people even feel more comfortable talking to a machine than to a human, right? Because what do humans tend to be? We tend to be judgmental, right?
Biased.
We tend to be biased. We have inherent biases, right? Well, I will argue that AI may too, that have the bias of the program,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But we kind of assume, right or wrong, that the computer won't be biased, that the artificial intelligence won't be biased and won't judge us. And, because they're not real, I can tell you about my sexual history or something bad that I did when I was young that I'm ashamed of, right? But maybe I wouldn't tell a real person, whether it's a face-to-face encounter or a telephone encounter. I may feel ashamed of saying that to a living person, but I'm okay saying it to a computer. So in some ways, it may allow us to deliver better care, because the more honest a person is, the better job you can do taking care of it, right? Crucial information doesn't get left out. But AI has flaws, right? AI is not perfect. AI sometimes will very confidently state something that's not true. They call this hallucinations, is what they call it in the AI world. And we don't know why that happens. And the programmers haven't yet been able to figure out how to fix that. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people will be talking to AI avatars and talking about their diabetes management, and it would be great for chronic conditions like, COPD management, diabetes management, weight loss, exercise, doing physical therapy, because you don't necessarily have to have a living person. The machine language has the information. It knows what to look at. It knows what to say. It knows how to respond to your answers and your cues. And so that's a way to sort of maybe very efficiently deliver care to a much broader population more efficiently than to have each person meet with a doctor. But, how effective is that going to be? We don't know, because we're not there yet, right? But I can see a world in 5 or 10 years where you're much more likely to talk to an avatar than a living person when you call in to your doctor's office to talk about your rash or your cough or about this medication, and is it safe to take with this other medication?
Yeah.
And probably the information will be accurate and people will feel like they've been well served. And I mean, in the end, if the person gets the right information and they feel taken care of, does it matter if it was an artificial intelligence program telling them or a real person? I don't know. I mean, some of that is generational. One of the interesting concepts that has evolved during my practice is sort of a systems over individual approach. And in surgery, one of the ways that manifests is something we call pooling patients. So pooling patients is where you have a group of physicians who do the same operation, basically the same way, and you have a patient who needs that operation. Well, you get a consult, and you get an appointment with the doctor, and the reason you came to see me was because that was my week to be the breast cancer surgeon, right? And I rotate it with 3 other surgeons. And if it had been a different week, you'd been diagnosed, you may have seen one of my colleagues instead of me. But for simple, straightforward things like hernias and gallbladder surgery, sometimes the patient doesn't care who does their surgery. Sometimes the patient, as long as they're being cared for and the person is qualified, that's all they care about. So this idea that, well, you met me, but my schedule doesn't have any openings for a while, but my partner, they have an appointment next week for surgery. And if you'd be willing to let them do the surgery without necessarily meeting them and doing a consultation, Are you okay with that? And when this first got rolled out, I thought, who in their right mind is going to let someone that they've never, I mean, short of an emergency room, I'm dying, emergency, you don't have a choice. Who in their right mind would not want to go meet the doctor, establish rapport, all the stuff we talked about was so important earlier,
Yeah.
right? Who would want to do that? I want to meet the person. I want to trust the person, right? But amazingly, there are a lot of people who don't care. As long as they're getting good care when they want it, that's more important to them than do I like the person I met about the consultation? Did I feel trusted by that person? I thought it was going to be, hokum, but turns out a lot of people are really okay with that. And it's the younger generations more so than older generations. So that's a bit of a bit of change in the way society is and the way we think and what we value. But I think it's also too a little bit of function of who you meet that first time, because I'm not trying to brag, but very few of my patients who are eligible for pool choose it. Most of the time they will look at me and they say, no, I want to stay with you. And it's because I think it's because I took the time to make them feel comfortable and to make them feel that they could trust me and that I would take care of them. And to them, that's more important than getting their surgery a week earlier or whatever the issue may be. I mean, some patients don't care, but I don't end up putting that many patients into the pool because most of my patients, once they've met me, want to stick with me. Actually, that's a point of pride for me, because to me, it means I'm doing my job in establishing the rapport, right? In displaying compassion for my patient and making them feel cared for.
Yeah. So when it comes to AI, definitely, I feel like this is the beginning point of discussion, because a lot of things is going to unfold. The time is going to tell us. So I hope this is one of many conversation with you, Dr. Herr. We'll follow up on this topic and see what's the evolution, in the medical field when it comes to AI, as well as, I'm reflecting on the important practice that you mentioned about compassion versus what AI might look like. So I think it all would be very interesting. My last question before open Q&A is, if you were to recommend one book about compassion, what would that be?
In that it relates to the subject of like emotional intelligence, there is an author, Daniel Goleman. He's pretty well known. He's kind of considered, I think, one of the fathers of the concept of emotional intelligence. I think his first book was entitled Emotional Intelligence. It was in the early 2000s. And then a couple years ago, maybe 5 years ago, he put out another book called The Emotionally Intelligent Leader, right? Where he actually talks about how emotional intelligence and compassion fits into leadership style. I mean, those are kind of like, I think, seminal books in that area. I mean, compassion comes in fiction too. I mean, I remember when I was in undergrad, and I was doing my humanities work, and we had to read and write about a book that looked at the kind of science and faith and how we tend to see them as mutually exclusive in society, but really they can be very much intertwined. And it was in the context of a man's relationship with his son, and it's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, interesting.
It's an oldie but a goodie, but one of the central kind of tenets in it is understanding each other and having compassion for people who are at a different place in their life or have different goals or aspirations or different ideas, and it points out how things can seem very, very different, but there's always a connection. There's always a way to bridge the gap. And compassion is what drives that. So that's one that really affected me when I was in my early 20s.
Great. We'll look into this.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Herr, thank you so much.
Well,
I learned a lot.
Well, thank you for having me. When you asked me to do this, I was a little bit taken back. Like, what do I know about any of this? What do I have to give
so much to offer.
Group of other professionals? But thank you for thinking that I had something to offer, and thank you all for listening. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you liked it, please share our podcast and stay tuned for more episodes. We'll see you later.